testing something out this morning. I'm doing a time lapse and a lesson at the same time, so we'll see how it goes. Got a piece of paper here. I have not masked this piece of paper, and this piece of paper is a 140-pound cold press, which generally I would not use for this this sort of painting, but we're gonna see how it goes. I have taped the back of it so that it won't come up off this table here that I'm working on, just so you know. I'm going to use a 1.5 inch flat brush to just kind of wet the whole piece of paper. That just kind of expedites wetting the whole piece. And then I'm going to kind of look at it. I'm going to look at the way the light is hitting the paper to kind of make sure that I have actually wet the whole piece of paper. If you haven't taped this piece of paper down pretty well, now's the time when it would very likely curl up. So I'm going to come over here to my, you know what I'm going to do? I'm sorry. I'm going to flip this and mirror this so that you can see exactly what I'm seeing. I think it was kind of upside down for you. So I'm going to create just a little streak in the sky. I'm painting a Milky Way sky, which several of you have seen me do already. But so I'm just going to paint like a very subtle, you can hardly see it. Let's see if I can adjust my light. Yeah, still hardly see it. Alright, so maybe not as subtle as I normally might do. So just going to paint that orange streak on the wet page. It's going to kind of fade out just a little bit. I'm going to come and I've got a little bit of kind of a red and a pink on my canvas here, or on my palette here. So I'm going to just touch a little bit of that red, and I'm going to paint the edges of that orange that I just did. And I'm going to kind of bring that red down into what would be the horizon line. So just real subtle. I'm going to paint over all of this that I'm painting right now. I know you can hardly see it, but that's okay. You'll see it when I get to the darker colors. I'm going back to that orange just a little bit, and I'm going to paint the very bottom edge of kind of this whole thing. Again, I'm just kind of thinking about, I'm envisioning what my horizon line is going to look like. Alright, I'm checking now. I'm kind of looking to see how wet my paper still is. It seems like it still has a decent amount of water to it. Cleaning my brush, see an area over here that I want to have a little more water on it. And I'm going to go for a very light blue. I think this might, it's like a robin's egg blue. This is a really nice, pretty sky blue. And because my paper is still wet, I'm going to start to touch the edges of the areas that I just painted. I just want to kind of fill these spaces now. So bring that color over, and I want to fill the whole top part of what the sky would be. So notice I'm not being real conscious about like evening out my strokes, or this is all going to be kind of rough. A little blue dab in there. Because I want it to be, ultimately, I want the sky to kind of be blotchy. Because that kind of is how the night sky is. I'm going to extend that orange streak just a tiny bit. See, I just brought some blue in there. And I'm going to go ahead and get this other side. Again, keeping in mind, I'm doing layers on layers here. So I'm just going to kind of bring this down. I want to try not to have, on this bottom section here, I really want to try not to have a solid edge of paint. So I'm just going to, I'm going to bring some of this blue down. And I'm actually going to carry it all the way down to the bottom of my page. I'm going to use that medium brush again because my paper is kind of drying fairly quickly this morning. I'm just wetting that again, re-wetting that so that I can bring that blue down. The reason I do that is so that when I paint my mountains later, when I paint the rest of this landscape, it's best to not have just kind of a blank white piece of paper down here. Alright, the one thing I notice up here, so I'm happy with the orange streak, but I've got this blue, so I'm cleaning my brush, getting most of the paint out, most of the water out, and I'm just going to kind of push that, I don't know if you could see that blue, there's like a solid blue line there. I'm just going to kind of push it out. Remember, I want that orange to be most prominent there. I'm going to actually come over, my paper's still reasonably wet, and I'm going to just go over this orange streak just one more time, just to kind of make it a little bit bolder. One of the things I talk about frequently with watercolors is how you can always make it darker, really hard to make it lighter. So I kind of always keep that in mind. I go real light to start, knowing that I can come back if I want to make it darker. That's easy to do. Very difficult to make it lighter. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're doing this process. And also, as I mentioned before, keep in mind that we're going to be coming back even right now. Paper's still wet. I'm going to go for a darker blue. See, I'm starting to mix it up here. And I'm actually going to bring in some maroon. It's kind of a purple color over here. I'm going to bring that in. And I'm just going to start to kind of fill in some of these spaces. And again, I'm purposefully being what I might call blotchy. I don't want to just fill in all of this with solid color. I'm starting to create what will be the night sky. And the night sky is not a solid color, contrary to what you might think. This edge here where it meets the orange and the reddish, I want to use a clean brush with most of the water off just to kind of feather that out, kind of soften that edge where it kind of joins the orange and the red. So you can see with that clean brush, I'm just going to very gently go over. Again, this sky that I'm working on now is not, I'm still probably going to bring 2 or 3 more layers of color on it. So it's by no means finished. It's not really close to finished. So I'm just kind of building up some layers of darker color. I'm going to come back and touch. So everything that I'm doing here feels kind of loose and unfinished, and that is all intentional. That's all, like even the reason I've kind of done that that rounded edge there, that curled rounded edge, is because I know that the watercolor paper and the watercolor is going to kind of fade out. So just clean my brush, and I got most of the water off of the brush, and I'm just going to kind of come back again and just touch this edge where that darker blue is coming into that orange. I'm going to touch the other side as well. Because in the Milky Way sky, the orange streak is there, but it's real, it's being engulfed by all of those darker colors around it. So again, paper's still wet. I'm going to come over now and I'm going to get a slightly more purple. So that means I'm going to less blue, more of the red in this, in the brush that I'm touching. And I'm just going to bring some of this purple into a couple kind of random spots. I just want to kind of build up some purple layers. And if you look really closely at a night sky, there's some really wonderful photographers out there who make great images of Milky Way or night skies. You can find some good images, and you can just kind of see that these colors are there. You just have to kind of look for them and notice them. So I'm just creating a couple places where I want this purple to kind of stand out. I'm going to let that set up just a little bit, because what ultimately I'm going to do next, I might come back with a little bit of the dark blue. Ultimately what I'm going to do next is come over most of this with a layer of kind of a black blue. So I think I am going to do just a little more of this dark blue with a little bit of that purple mixed in, just in a couple of these spots where I feel like it's still pretty light. As you get further away from the orange, that would be your kind of Milky Way streak in your sky, like up into these corners, your sky should get darker for reference. I've made a number of these paintings now, so I'm doing something that I normally would not recommend for students to do, and that is I'm painting this without a reference image. So I'm not looking at a photograph, which again, like I said, I would not recommend that most of the time. So cleaning my brush, and I'm going to actually use a hair dryer to expedite this process just a little bit. So I'm cleaning the brush. I see one spot over here that kind of doesn't have pigment in it the way I want, so I'm just kind of touch that and blend it out just a little bit. All right, I'm looking for my hair dryer. Here it is. Here we go. Alright, now I'm going to mix up, so I'm going to use this dark blue that I have here, and I'm just going to add some black to it. So, got the dark blue, want to mix up a decent amount of it, and I'm just going to touch, I don't know if you can see that, get this black over here. So I'm just going to touch the black and start to bring it over into that blue. Bringing that black over. And I want even more black than what I have currently. Because this is really, I've done all the underpainting now, but our sky still should be, relatively dark. So I've got my black here. And this time my piece of paper, my canvas, if you will, is dry. So I'm doing wet on dry. So I have to be real conscious about not allowing my the edge of my paint to dry. It's called your wet edge. So all right, here we go. Just bringing that kind of dark shade, and I'm going to bring it over everything that I've already painted, knowing that with watercolor it's going to show through. So that work that I've done, I'm not losing. I'm just kind of enhancing. in the way that's going to make this look more like a dark night sky that I'm trying to create. I got to a certain point over here now where I'm kind of close. I'm about an inch away from that orange, and I don't want this really solid dark color to come into that orange space. So I've used a clean brush there, and what I'm doing is just kind of blending out that edge. So I'm cleaning my brush again, and I'm just going to continue to kind of blend out that bottom edge. I'm looking in here now to see if there are any, streaks or things that look kind of abnormal, and I'm just going to come back with that dark blue that I've mixed up and kind of fill in some of that space again. And then I'm also going to come back to this where I was doing that blending and mix that. And now I'm looking, and again I'm seeing where the edge of that kind of lighter blue comes into the orange, and I see kind of a line here. So with again a clean brush, got most of the water out, I'm just gonna kind of touch that edge. You can hardly see it. I bet you can't even see it, but I'm just kind of bringing that over. All right, now I'm going to go to the other side. I'm just blending out some spaces over here, and I'm just going to kind of, again, fill in a little bit of a corner here with that dark, leaving space between the places that I know I want to keep lighter, and then cleaning my brush, getting most of the water out so that I can kind of blend that edge out so that it's not such a solid dark color going in there. I'm going to do the same thing again, clean my brush, most of the water out, and just kind of come back to those lighter areas that I have. And I'm going to do that even one more time. Might even take a look at your water. If your water seems like it's a little bit murky, you might even clean your water for this part, because cleaner water is going to help to keep it from getting totally just muddy in there. Alright, so now I'm just looking back at the areas of sky that I have, and I'm going to come back and just kind of, the whole paper is still relatively wet, so I'm just going to touch some of that darker color into these spaces, again, just to make those spaces maybe just a little bit darker than they are currently. And blotchy is good. Keeping in mind too that the way watercolor will work on your paper is now wet. It wasn't when we started, but the way the watercolor will work on wet paper, especially if it's pretty wet, is it's going to kind of bleed out just a little bit. So, all right. I think I might come with just a little bit. So I'm coming over to my palette and I'm getting just a little bit more black, making sure it's not just straight black. And I'm just going to, kind of like I did with the purple, I'm just going to touch some of this like blue-black into some of these spaces. Because again, our sky, it should not be an even solid color. It should be really kind of a mix of different colors. And I want that, because we're going to be painting stars on this later, I want that sky to be kind of nice and dark for those stars to show up nicely. Alright. So I think I'm at a place where I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop this video. I will make another video that kind of completes this painting, or shows most of what it would look like to complete this painting. And I'll post that. So thanks for watching. This will be my first YouTube watercolor painting tutorial. So I appreciate it was a friend, an Instagram friend from Vermont who asked me to do this. So thanks for that. And I'll see you again soon.